We have, I must say, a truly exceptional and highly distinguished panel of security experts and veterans who should be able to offer us real insights into a very complicated situation, to say the least, and also one that I think we will discover yet again is informed by a wide range of opinion in the incredibly vibrant democracy that is Israel. We have with us in rapid succession Ami Ayalon, who is a reserve admiral, the former commander of the Navy, the former head of the Shin Bet Security Agency, which is, of course, the main source of Israel's intel on the West Bank and Gaza, and more, and an outspoken advocate for compromise for peace with the Palestinians, which may seem to some like a bit of a paradox, but in fact, in Israel is rather common. His is a voice that is such a clear alternative to the current government that it truly needs to be heard, I think, by anyone who cares about the country. Also on the panel is a Reserve Major General Gershon Cohen, who commanded the Northern Corps and the war colleges, and quite fascinatingly, was the commander in charge of the 2005 unilateral evacuation of Gaza, soldiers and all 9,000 Jewish settlers, even though he opposed the move on strategic grounds, and I believe also on principle, I believe also on religious grounds. He is today a researcher and a prominent member of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, which is an association of former officers who, unlike Ami, are highly skeptical about giving up any further territory to the Palestinians. The fact that he nonetheless led the Gaza pullout really tells you something about the resilience of Israeli democracy. And rounding out the panel is the very thoughtful reserve Brigadier General Asaf Orion, who headed the military's strategic planning and international cooperation department. So he's really the right man to talk to. And was a fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Studies and is a researcher at INSS in Israel, where interestingly he often writes on China, as well as non-Israel, non-directly Israel-related topics, but also, of course, on Israel. And when it comes to the issues that we're discussing here today, without prejudging anything, I would imagine, to be proven wrong, but I imagine he falls somewhere in the middle between our two other guests, but we shall see. So, gentlemen, let's dive right into it. We are at a very, very precarious moment. Israel has suffered probably the biggest shock in its history on October 7th, certainly one of them. And the war that resulted has been long and ugly. 7 months into it, Hamas is badly degraded, without a doubt, but not wiped out. And the level of death and destruction in Gaza, where Hamas uses the population as human shields to a degree that I think may be unheard of in history, is so great that Israel has endured reputational damage that some fear will last for decades. Meanwhile, almost 200,000 people inside Israel are displaced in the north and also in the south. There's more than one front, which Napoleon taught us is a very bad idea indeed. And the public, never mind the watching world, is at a bit of a loss. Now, in the past 24 hours, Israel has begun an operation in Rafah, which may or may not be limited, and which may or may not be a negotiating tactic in the endless talks to free the hostages. Some Israelis had feared such a move would condemn the hostages to death. Others firmly believe that only relentless pressure will set them free. So, which is it? Are we approaching the total victory promised by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, or are we headed for an even bigger disaster in the form of a regional war without even having removed Hamas from power in Gaza? Is the government acting wisely, or is the growing chorus in Israel that claims that it's dragging its feet for political purposes correct? So very complex. So given the high stakes and the bewildering uncertainties, I would like to start by asking our three guests the same question. How do you grade the war so far? Where do you think it's going, and where should it go? I guess that's three questions. But despite that, I'm going to have to ask you, please, avoid long answers and limit yourselves to 4 minutes. Otherwise, we'll just not get a discourse going. And I have a few other follow-up questions before we turn it to the audience. And I'll start in the reverse order of introduction, but I think appropriately to our strategist on the panel, and turn to you, Asaf. The floor is yours.
So the war goes have been somewhat promoted, but are yet to be met. It won't be met by a war, but it needs to go to some additional complementary efforts, some of them diplomatic, some of them in a longer campaign. We have the topmost problem of hostages unresolved, and we need to get them back. We have displaced people, as you mentioned, needing to go back to their homes. And we're, I think, now at the crossroads between terminating it through a ceasefire deal, and we're waiting to see how the negotiation resolved. There's a lot of fake news and feints in this dynamic, or it can go to more escalation, Rafah, Lebanon, and so on. If it ends, maybe there is some prospect of a political arrangement with Saudi Arabia, but that's also a long shot. So where should it go? It should go into a situation when Israel is safe within its borders, that its enemies were seriously degraded to a point when they can't threaten Israel over time. We need to start seeing a trajectory of promoting better conditions for some reconciliation and coexistence in the future. I am on the skeptic side of those who say, yes, two-state solution now. That's a Nike approach, just do it. It's not really something from the practical world on the short term, but it needs work to be achievable later on. We need to get the world to refocus on Iran and Iran nuclear, because that's not going away, and within the next few years or decade, it will become imminent. I think there's a huge potential for Israeli integration in the region, like what we saw in the coalition, which shot down Iran's missiles in mid-April. We need to work hard on Israel's position in the world, on our relations with America, which I think Ironclad doesn't even begin to describe how important it is. It needs to be steel-plated or totally steel-made or platinum. And finally, we need to reassure the safety of Jews all over the world, and to go back to fixing our own domestic situation, because it stems, I would say, from two main sources. One is Iran's designs, which is fueling this conflict on a regional scale.
Podcast, encontro do IPO.
And the other source of the problem, except Palestinian intransigence and their own jihadi identity of Hamas and so on, is our own domestic political crisis. And on this, we need to get over and get back to business.
Saf, thank you very much. We obviously can see that we have known unknowns and unknown knowns, and it's a complex situation. I'll turn to you, Gershom. I have to again ask you, please limit yourself to 3 minutes so that we can conversation.
The way you concluded what Saf said just is a beginning for what I am trying to deliver, the idea that the war going to a huge uncertainty regarding almost everything. The key is Iran, and every child can understand the questions. Once a great teacher, Avishai Margalit, a philosopher, told me that if I have a dissertation, PhD dissertation, and I can't explain to a child what it is all about, then maybe I don't understand really what I'm doing, or it is not really interesting. And the key question is, why the Iranians are directing that war against Israel? They are not in a conflict with Israel regarding territory, not regarding either ideas. Why? The same about Hezbollah. Really, why? Why it is so important? Because we can tell about Palestinian is Gaza, they are fighting for the right to return, and others, they are refugees, etc. But Hezbollah and Nasrallah is not a refugee. So the main question is why. And the key question about that war is Iran, because they are really designing the whole system surrounding Israel, including the Houthi in the Red Sea, Hezbollah, militia in Syria, in Iraq, and Hamas. So the war is not only taking place in the physical dimension, as every war really taking place, it is taking place not only in the psychological dimension. It is really hard to conceive. It is about faith and belief. And we are, for the first time, facing a challenge to struggle against jihadistic group. This is the main motivation. Hezbollah are jihadic, Hamas are jihadic, and just speaking about that, bringing us to huge embarrassment regarding the question how we can really come to a definite end with agreement about something. This is the main problem here.
Understood. I will touch actually on some of the things that you've raised as well as Asaf in my follow-up question, but let's go to Ami Ayalon, who I'm sure has his own and slightly different perspective. Please, Ami.
Yes. What was amazing when you asked the question was, how do we grade the war so far? And after listening to my two friends, the question is, which war? Are we fighting against Iran, against Hezbollah, against Hamas, against the Houthis? This is a major issue because we started the war against Hamas in Gaza. So when we started the war, the first decision that our cabinet agreed on was we are not going to discuss the day after. The immediate impact of not discussing the day after is we are going to war without any political goal. Because we cannot agree, because the coalition will fall apart. Because of political reasons, we do not have a political goal to this war. The immediate result is that the war, a war without a political goal, becomes the end and not the mean in order to achieve a better political reality. Now, though, if the question is whether we are going to the right direction today, I think that although it was not mentioned, but the major goals, unwritten goals, was to defeat Hamas, dismantle at least the military capabilities and its leadership, to bring back the hostages, and to make sure that this war will not expand to more fronts. When you are trying to understand where are we today, 132 hostages are still somewhere in the tunnels. We are fighting in 3 or 4 fronts, and the rifts within the Israeli society are much deeper. We are losing the international community, and no one knows where we are heading because we still did not decide, and the political goal or on the day after. So my answer is we are going nowhere, and unless we should change our policy, we are bringing ourselves, I know that it seems dramatic, to the end of the Zionist dream. If the Zionist dream is to see Israel safe and our identity is a Jewish democracy, so we are heading to the end of the Jewish identity, the end of our Jewish democracy or democracy identity, and we are going to a never-ending war with an Arab and the Muslim world.
Thank you very much, Ami, and thank you for making me appear clairvoyant by having predicted that your point of view would be slightly different from that of the others. I would like actually to throw out a question for any of the three of you who want to answer, but again, please, just very briefly, almost yes, no, or indifferent. And this has been alluded to in the answers. The Biden administration has been trying to establish a security axis between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and the other supposedly moderate Sunni countries and the West, as a bulwark against Iran and its allies, something Israel probably would benefit from, to say the least, and has been hoping for some time. Now, Netanyahu has resisted this because it means accepting the condition, which is the PA returning to Gaza and beginning a dialogue on two states, a partition that Ami Ayalon says is essential for Israel and not a compromise. So he considers these things a cost. Others obviously do not. My question is, Israel's rejection of this grand design of Biden's, it's near indifference to that grand design. Is it smart or is it stupid? I welcome a really quick answer from all three or anyone who, any of you who has something to say, and then move on to other questions.
Definitely, it's the most prominent promise that we see around as positive potential. But since Netanyahu's coalition is like a Rubik's cube, and you can't console what you need to do for Saudi Arabia normalization with what is demanded to be done on the Palestinian side, it's become very difficult to thread the needle.
Yeah. Well, clearly. So basically, for political reasons, Israel's refusing the grand prize in the lottery, more or less.
It's not even refusing, it's just not answering.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is exactly the way I understand it. It's the greatest opportunity that we have been offered for the last, 20, 30 years. We have to make sure that we understand the huge difference between the Israeli people and the Israeli government. Biden plan or vision is supported under certain conditions by 70% of the people in Israel, according to all the polls, on the conditions that, normalization with Saudi Arabia and creation of an axis that will face Iran and its proxies, and bringing back the hostages. But this is, of course, obvious. It is not acceptable by a small minority within the Israeli society, which control our government as a result of our political system. It's a coalition system. So it's a great opportunity. It will be a disaster if we shall not accept it. And unfortunately, as long as this government exists, the option to the plan to be accepted is very minor.
I originally said not all have to answer, but I think the statements have been so clear that I must put that to Gershon as well. I mean, a government that I strongly suspect that you support is being accused here of missing a tremendous opportunity that is of strategic value, almost incalculable, game-changing. How do you feel about this?
No, here really, I cannot agree with my friend Ami. Actually,
by the way, Gershon, this is the reason why I wanted you so much to be a member in this panel.
Okay, great, thank you. And my answer to Biden, if I would have been in a position to answer him, could be yes, but. Yes, it is good opportunity, but I will remind him that according to my understanding of Yitzhak Rabin planning, a kind of Palestinian state already existing since January 1996, when 90% of Palestinians have been removed to be controlled by Palestinian Authority. What really the Saudi Arabia demanding from Israel is a very dangerous step. I think that the majority of the Israelis cannot accept that. We cannot accept a border along the main road 6 and Kfar Saba. We cannot accept to bring back the Jordan Valley and to divide Jerusalem. So we can say yes, but there are a lot of complicated risks that even if we are not speaking just about how we are going to uproot again Jewish settlers, but also about how we can defend Israel in the 21st century warfare, in the potential of anti-tank missiles, in the same way that they are launched to the Galil area, they could be launched to Ben Gurion Airport, to Tel Aviv, etc. Therefore, my conclusion is yes, but.
Gershon, I have to just push back a little bit on that because you've touched, and I assure the audience I'll get back in a second to Gaza and the situation with Rafah and military stuff on the ground. But we've quickly gone to 30,000 feet here, and therefore the question begs itself. It just does. You described the strategic or more the tactical military dangers of pulling out of the West Bank, and your position is well known on that issue. I have to note that I believe the grand design of Biden would not require Israel to set up a Palestinian state tomorrow and pull out of the West Bank, but rather begin a dialogue, which is sort of a small, it's a small barrier to entry, and it wouldn't necessarily cause dangers tomorrow. But really, in the longer scheme of things, Gershon, are you really not concerned about the demographic implications of having Judea and Samaria, as you call them, the West Bank, become part of it?
Not at all, because...
No, hold on, but let me just say, right now, I mean, you're also on record as having opposed the Gaza pullout, which you implemented. Usually interesting, but
yes, wait.
So, if I may, please, right now, Israel, plus Judea, plus Samaria, plus the West Bank, has an Arab majority.
Yes, but I must emphasize, I'm going with Yitzhak Rabin. The main contribution of Yitzhak Rabin was that in May 1994, all Palestinian residents of Gaza Strip have been removed to be governed by Palestinian authorities that have been just established. In January 1996, 90% of all Palestinians in Judea and Samaria have been removed to Palestinian authority. It means that no anymore. That was the main intention of Yitzhak Rabin, to solve the risk.
Gershon, I have to keep the conversation going. The question is, the fact that they are controlled by an autonomy government, does that mean they're not really in Israel? And some will say they are. Let me flip it around to Ami. Yes. Okay, there's a demographic problem for sure. There's a democratic problem, but on the other hand, there is a topographic problem. If Israel pulls out of the West Bank will come within 25 kilometers of Tel Aviv and will surround Jerusalem on three sides. What if Hamas takes that over one day? Is that a danger Israel can tolerate?
This is exactly what I'm trying to explain. And I said it just a few minutes ago. The more Palestinians we kill, Hamas increase his power. We have to understand, for almost 4.5 years, all what I did was to fight terror. When I was the director of the Israeli Shin Bet, the first time when I saw the front, the military front, from a totally different perspective. So let me tell you something about this type of war. It is not a war between two states. It is a war against terror. And this is why we are fighting this war in 2 dimensions. One dimension is a battlefield, yes, and we are achieving a great achievements. Our military is doing all what he should do. But the more we are winning in the battlefield, the more we are losing on the other dimension, which is a war of ideas, because you cannot defeat an idea with the use of military power. And the more power we use, this idea is going deeper into the root of the Palestinian society. I'm not afraid of the Palestinians on the other side of the border. I'm afraid what he wants to do. But Gershon a few minutes ago asked exactly the right question. Why? Why a small child will take a knife and his dreams will be all what I want to do is to kill a Jewish or an Israeli citizen. Why? Because he hates. And unless he will have hope, unless he will have a political horizon, then he will be a very, very fool for enemies. If he will have hope, he will be much more pragmatic. He will have something to lose. And once he has something to lose, I can deter him. I can fight and try to win.
Look, anyone who's read my own op-eds will know I largely agree with you, but I see the counter narrative where even if it's a minority opinion on the Palestinian side, small minority even, Palestinians have not proved capable of keeping at bay their own radicals who are nihilistic and maximalistic.
Are we keeping our radicals? Can we control our terror? Look what happens in the West Bank. We always blame the Palestinians, and yes, we are right, because they should be blamed.
Of course. Listen, let me drag it a little bit back to not the weeds, but at least the ground here, and turn it maybe to Asaf. We're looking at the Rafah operation here. I'm a little bit mystified at how they can really start an operation without having first removed the 1 million displaced Palestinians from other parts of Gaza who are in Rafah. It kind of looks not so serious. So I'd ask you two things. A, is the current Rafah operation serious, or is it a case of war being diplomacy by other means? And also, look, the only real deal I've seen on the table from Hamas, really, in one form or another, is take back the hostages in exchange for an end to the war and a pullout from Gaza. And of course, Israel doesn't want to do that. But on the other hand, since Netanyahu won't allow the PA to go back into Gaza, it kind of looks like the whole thing's a farce because you're leaving Hamas there in one form or another anyway. It's all so confusing. But at the end of the day, would you accept that deal of Israel just calling it a day, having dealt this degree of punishment to Hamas and indeed to the Palestinians, and getting back the hostages, but stopping the war? Would you do that?
There are a lot to unpack in your question. One, let's unpack the 1 million. It's became a myth. You know, Rafah became as important as Jerusalem, the be-all and have-all of the Middle East, the cornerstone. You know, it's not so important place, and for Israel it has several important points to attend to. One is remaining Hamas units. Okay, we can add that to our to-do list. There's nothing urgent in that mission. Second is to control the flow of goods from Sinai into Gaza. And that's the key to Hamas' ability to resurge, to rearm, to reorganize, to reemerge in the day after. And since we are talking about a long war, not in the endurance of how much or how long it takes us, but it's a question of how long do you want your achievement to sustain. And logistics from Sinai is basically sustaining any achievement that will be made in Gaza. Is it a real operation? Of course it is a real operation. And here, you know, a cautious word, don't fall into the all or nothing false choice. Either we remove 1 million people and we take all of Rafah and we clear it up totally till this imaginary total victory, or we do nothing. No, life is not an all or nothing. We took one bite of this rotten apple. There are Israeli flags over the Rafah crossing. On the Palestinian side, that's a sovereignty symbol for Hamas. That's a source of income. It's a very important asset to deal with. And also it tells something, it tells Hamas something about how much is Israel being reined in by the Biden administration, you know, to be unable to do anything until there is a deal. Now, do we accept a deal? Here we are again in false choices realm. There is no one deal. As we heard yesterday, Hamas accepted the deal, except they didn't accept the deal. They accepted some sort of something they actually counter offered. So we need to be very careful not to be misled in what they're doing. Certainly, we need our hostages back. And let me give you, let me reveal a secret that Ami just said. And Gershon also thinks along those lines. This relationship with the Palestinians is here to stay. And we are going to keep on trying to figure out how to coexist or fight each other or whatever for a very long time. The war goals, if they are met, they will be met on a decade or a generational scale. It's not standing with a stopwatch to see if it's next month.
Asaf, but let me push back a little on you as well, since I've so to the others. You're talking about a generational scale, and we have hostage families in Israel that think their loved ones are dying tomorrow.
That's an immediate thing to
hold
resolve.
on, if I may finish the question.
Yes.
There's an argument that says you have to rescue them today. You can live to fight Hamas another time. Maybe in 3 months, because it's in their DNA to provoke with a rocket attack. The provocation will be there. Why not get the hostages while you can?
I think you should. I think that's your main thing that you need to do immediately. That's the urgent thing. And I think the first maxim of strategy is actually understanding how to buy the time and how to use the time. Not everything needs to happen now, and many choices that are forced on you to do. You need to decide now whether to defeat Hamas or release your hostages. That's a false choice. That's a manipulation.
Gershon, do you agree? Prioritize the hostage.
I agree with Asaf. Maybe it is not interesting enough that I agree, but I definitely agree. And I can, in addition, tell something from my own experience. Actually, in the time of this engagement, 2005, the military attitude was that we must keep the border of Egypt to keep what entering to Gaza Strip. And it was a decision of Prime Minister Sharon, politically oriented, to withdraw from the border of Egypt due to the awareness that as long as we are staying there, we cannot get free from the occupation of Gaza. He wanted to get definite declarations that we are not keeping any occupation inside the Gaza Strip. Right now, again, the same issue is rising up again, because if we are staying just in that border, in the path in which the Palestinians are connecting themselves to Egypt, so we are really closing Gaza by our own hands. So we are occupying Gaza. On the other side, if we are going outside, all the problem will just repeat itself. So actually what happened is that it was a kind of a method that we can militarily come back to control this position, and we will see what will happen next. I don't think that we are going to stay there. Also, I'm not thinking that we are going to stay in Gaza Strip.
I want to underscore to the audience what we've heard here. Clearly, the panel has a great diversity of opinion in terms of strategy and long-term vision, but there's agreement that prioritizing the hostages now, even if that means essentially and effectively the end of the war, should happen. This reflects something real in Israeli public opinion. It's dynamic. The opinion is moving in that direction in Israel, and there's a lot of pressure on the government. And this could be counterproductive to the hostage negotiation talks, because Hamas sees this, because Israel's a free society, they see what people are thinking, and it may cause the price to rise. I have a question from the audience, which is who should rule Gaza on the long-awaited day after, when Hamas is finally gone in one form or another? And there's some obvious choices. One, the PA, rejuvenated, restored, redemocratized, whatever, but a version of the PA. Two, international coalition, Arab countries, whatever. Three, Israeli occupation. Four, what I consider to be a fabulistic, fantastical, and nonsensical notion of local tribal leaders or something that at some point somebody in the government spoke of, or I don't know what five could be, Martians, but should there be a permanent Israeli occupation? The government rejects the PA, which I'll be honest with you guys, I think is pretty wrong-headed. But what other ideas are out there? Gershon, who should control Gaza after Hamas?
That is a real problem. I think as Major General Giora Island always emphasized that we would prefer to declare it was not the position of government, but I agree with him. From the beginning, we should take a position to stay. We are not going to stay there, and also not Palestinian Authority. Everyone else that you can find, it's okay. But actually, no one will really come to do that. No
By the
one
way, the other
can
alternative
really,
to Israel or the PA is Hamas. And that's what
actually, that's
all these
true.
years in effect.
That's a problem. And therefore, also in 2008, Prime Minister Olmert, in the Operation Cast Lead, he demanded to take back Gaza, to demolish Hamas, and to find a kind of international force that will take responsibility. Ehud Barak, that was at that time defense minister, disagree with him. I think that this disagreement came out through the awareness of Ehud Barak that he cannot find someone who can take that
should it be someone
challenge.
else? Let's ask Ami. Should it be a new version of the PA that isn't the PA, like Mohammed
Actually not, but in the same way that today Palestinian Authority cannot overcome Fatah Shuhada al-Aqsa, that they are radicals fighting against Israel in Jenin, in Nablus, in Tulkarem. So how they can do that actually in Judea and Samaria? They are doing that with Israeli help.
Before our time runs out, Ami, who should it be running Gaza?
We are very good in saying no, and we are very good in blaming Palestinians, and we are very good in denying any other option. Today, Israel is facing a T-junction, which means we have only two exit strategies. One is to accept that the Palestinians, starting with the Palestinian Authority, and we have to do everything in order to reform this authority, but the idea is the Palestinian Authority will be responsible. Second, if this will be the first step, then all the Arab states who signed the Arab Peace Initiative, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Morocco, Jordan, Egypt, will be ready to help, meaning first to be the guardians until the Palestinian Authority will reshape itself and will have elections, because Abu Mazen is identical to Netanyahu. He cannot lead anybody to anywhere, and our prime minister cannot lead anybody to anywhere. So both parties will have to reshape ourselves and them. And this is the opening. This is the opening.
Yes. I have a question from the audience that's coming from several directions, and it aligns with everything being said here. Can Israel possibly make its way out of this morass without new elections? Can the current government fix the problem? And I think, again, we're running out of time. I'd be happy with a yes or no for either.
No. My answer is no.
What about you, Gary?
I agree.
No. Everyone agree, yes.
No. Wow. Well, again, audience, wide diversity of opinion shows that everyone wants new elections, which reflects something interesting in public opinion. Almost all the polls show 75% of the people want new elections. If you factor out the Haredi party, that's like 90% of non-Haredi Israelis. It's craziness. And that's the reality. So strange. We have a bunch of questions on Iran. Do you trust the U.S. to basically save Israel and the world from a nuclear Iran? I think I'd put that to Asaf. International cooperation?
Most people you talk to heard the U.S. presidents commit to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, and most of them doubt that America will deliver on that. The war fatigue and the lack of appetite for muscle make it very doubtful. And by the way, since the Iranians sense that, they become emboldened and more aggressive in their conduct.
What was the pullout from the nuclear deal by Trump having been convinced by Netanyahu? Good or bad idea?
The question is which America?
Okay,
America of
again,
Trump or America
election.
of Biden? I don't think that we can rely or trust America because I think that Trump did a major mistake that brought Iran much closer to achieve nuclear power. So I have no idea which America are you referring to, and I don't think that we should rely on America today.
Do you think Israel should attack the Iranian nuclear sites, the Taz and the others?
I think that we cannot do that.
Right.
Why we cannot do that? Not because we are not brave enough, as we have been before in Usirat in Iraq or in Dir Azur in Syria, but due to the lessons that the Iranian learned from all that, mainly that it is not located just in one place. It means that it is not one shot and it is beyond, and the problem is solved. It is very complicated. It means that it is a whole campaign. And beyond that, I'm in anxiety from the Iranian, not only regarding nuclear threat, but also due to the fact that equivalently to the nuclear effort, they build the idea of Qasem Soleimani, militia forces surrounding Israel that can defeat Israel with RPG, as happened in 7th of October, or with other missiles, with drones and other means by Hezbollah and others. So the quantity of all that enemies guided by Iran, coordinated by Iran, it is a real existential threat to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the coalition is so crucial.
I have two questions I want to get to, and we are kind of running out of time, but I think I will allow it, if allowed to allow it, to go over time slightly, which are a little bit beyond what we're talking about, but I think are important nonetheless. So one is this, and really it's none of our fields of expertise necessarily, maybe a little bit mine because I supervise the coverage of Palestine for AP. Are the Palestinians brainwashed by Hamas, or could they change? Can Israel change the narrative with diplomacy to lessen its isolation, lessen the hatred of the Palestinians? I suspect yes, because that relates to something you said before.
My answer is yes, but my answer is yes, but we never tried. And I saw when I was the director of the Shin Bet, I saw before when I was the commander of the Navy and Oslo was signed, I saw the change within the Israeli society and within the Palestinian society. We have to negotiate and we have to fight terror together. We fought terror against Hamas, cooperating with people who were in our jail, because during the first Intifada, they led the Palestinian violence. Jibril Rajoub, Muhammad Dahlan, Amin al-Hindi, all these people, in our eyes were terrorists. They were in our jail. But once the agreement was signed, it was a huge change within the Palestinian people, and by the way, within the Israeli people. What happened later is something that we have to try to understand. I think that we never gave ourselves the right answer. Why did we lose the confidence on both sides that we had after the signing of this agreement. And this is for the history.
You know, by the way, I have my own answer to that, which is a little bit different, I think, from what yours would be. I think I think there was a strong strain in Fatah opinion to pretend to be peaceable, but in fact to prefer the one-state solution because they are they have a longer-term thinking than the Israeli right wing, and they have a greater ability to absorb pain and punishment and inconvenience over a long period of time, and they prefer the whole country. But
I agree.
Speculation.
I agree if you mean Hamas. I don't agree if you think this is
For
not
sure
the
Hamas.
Fatah.
For sure Hamas.
But
But
Hamas is 50.
I've heard Abu Allah, for example,
Hamas
also
is 15% within the Palestinian people. They are identical to Ben Gvir and Smotrich,
yeah.
less than 15%, and they are totally against the division of the land.
I know. I think we all. Let me go quickly.
I think you need to
then
take
I
it
wanna
to the
ask one last
regional
question.
level as an ideology. It's not just a question of Palestinian Israelis. It's a question of jihadism. And in this sense, there's an optimistic note looking at the Emirates working on de-radicalization and on tolerance and so on. There's quite an interesting record there. Israel is unequipped to de-radicalize Muslims, but I think we have in the regional context there's potential for partnerships on that.
I have a question that I think touches on, relates to this idea of a grander scheme of things in the regional and maybe global sense. I'll just read it out. Some believe that we are just pawns in the great game and that Russia is behind everything via Iran and its influence on Hamas as part of their efforts to draw attention away from Ukraine, weaken America's position, expend treasure, and upend American politics. Now, I'm not a big one for conspiracy theories, but when it comes to Russia, I think it would be foolish to discount it altogether. What do you think?
Was it sent to you in Cyrillic fonts? This sounds like Russian propaganda. From what I understand, Russia is great in exploiting crises that already occur. So they ride waves very well. I don't think you can attribute all that Iran does, all that Hamas does, all that happened since to the grand strategy of Tsar Putin. That's far out.
Okay.
Totally agree.
In addition, I can just
please
contribute another message. If I'm trying to understand Iran, I'm quite studying that. They succeeded to create a bridge between Sunni and Shia, something that was not impossible in the last centuries, due to the common denominator to demolish Israel and to come to fight Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa and Al-Quds. Therefore, Khomeini defined the last Friday of Ramadan as Al-Quds Day, and by that, he succeeded to bridge between Hamas, Sunni, jihadic groups, other jihadi groups from the Sunni, and with Hezbollah Shia, and with Iran, those who are leading the Republic Islamic Revolution. So actually, to try to take themselves out from this idea, how they can bridge the connection between Shia and Sunni.
And Arab and Farsi people, Persians. It's not even in the same nation.
They are not Arabs, they are not Sunnis, they are a small minority within the Middle East, and they are taking advantage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the holy places in Jerusalem in order to achieve supremacy and to increase their popularity in Saudi Arabia, over the Islam, and in Palestine. Once we shall choose another way and we shall start negotiating even if it will take decades, they will. This is the only way for them to lose power in Riyadh, in Damascus, in Amman, and in Cairo.
You know, there's another question here that I wouldn't mind hearing your thoughts on, which is it wrong for Israeli media to sanitize what's happening in Gaza? Meaning, you all have recommended new elections, but if new elections are held, will that happen in the context of the Israeli electorate knowing what has really been done in their name? I think we can agree that it has been sanitized. How dangerous, how bad, how good or bad is that? Is it necessary for morale, or is it bad for democracy and basic information? Maybe, Ami, if you want to answer, go ahead. I wanted to hear from
I want to try.
I think his answer may be telling.
No, okay. First of all, Israelis, we know the figures, but we do not watch Arab television, Al Jazeera, and we do not see the images. So we found a way in order to tell ourselves a story, which I believe is a just and a true story, that we are fighting a just war. But I don't think that we understand that our war is only against Hamas and not against the Palestinian people. For Israelis today, unfortunately, the way I understand Israelis, we are not able to separate between Hamas and the Palestinian people, because most of the Palestinian people support Hamas, not because they accept the ideology. Now, the problem with the elections, if you ask me, is that the elections will avoid the Palestinian issue. And we can find ourselves with a different government, but with the same policy. And if we shall change government and we shall not change policy, we are not going to a better place.
Gershon, what do you think? If there were new elections, do the Israeli people know everything they need to know? Have they been well served?
Actually, election without changing something due to the crisis, and we must bring awareness of a total crisis of all our premises. So it means that we must find new elections with a new horizon, not the same visions that we got to be delivered before. And right now, I cannot see that emerging. I'm expecting a new emerging of new ideas and new leaders.
Very interesting. You know, Asaf, in just in 15 to 30 seconds, do you have final thoughts that we haven't addressed? Maybe pivoting off what's been said just in the past minute?
I think one needs to internalize the depth of the trauma that Israel underwent. I don't think the information is being sanitized. I think people are watching what they are willing to see. And I think the world, turned the page very fast on October 7th. And for us, I think collectively, it's a trigger event, bringing back all the national traumas. And the talk about an existential threat became very cheap, I think in an overstated manner. But I would take us back to the beginning of what I said. Israel cannot get out of this corner without a new leadership, not in the sense of right or left, this Palestinian paradigm or that, going back to the basic values and tenets of public service, of truth to power and truth to public, of decency and accountability and responsibility. Like with the truth decay and with the huge damages of propaganda, corruption, and gutting of the public service, this is the heart of this maelstrom storm that we're inside. And with
Very
that, like our national security ripples begin at home. It's not just something like the most important piece is at home and not outside.
Thank you very much, Asaf. Very well put. I think all three of you were inspiringly interesting and eloquent today. It really seems to me to be quite a global historic paradox because Israel is so very successful in some ways, higher per capita GDP than France and Germany in 2022, world-beating technology power, amazing military, great culture, resilient democracy despite the troubles, and yet it faces several genuinely existential dangers. At least one of them, we haven't touched upon it here, but and I'll leave that mysterious, of its own making. What an interesting situation. Obviously, it's going to yield a lot of different assessments of where we should go strategically, but I think to the audience, I'd point out, despite the great diversity of our panel, the fact that we have something approaching agreement that new leadership is needed, new elections are needed, and on the ground right now, the hostages should be prioritized, is truly fascinating, actually, and reflects something happening in Israeli opinion. Although some in the audience may disagree, that's my take on matters. I'll hand it back to Nirit and Brad with my great thanks to Asaf, Gershon, and Ami for being on the panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
תודה רבה.
Well, thank you, Dan, and to our panel and all of you for attending today's event. I want to thank the panel for sharing their wisdom and experience with us. I just want to say it's up to us as leaders to make the change, bring the peace and security that Israel and our people deserve. And I challenge each of you as YPOers and leaders in your community and companies to do that. So just by even attending this, you're doing something. So thank you.